Hey, have you ever thought of what if information security is a martial art? In this session, I hope to provide you some of guideline and tips of how to build an integrated and sustainable security governance model. My name is Wan-Ju Chen. I have over 10 years of experiences in cybersecurity across different industries such as education, banking, pharmaceutical, and energy sectors. I feel honored to be invited as a guest speaker for CyberSec Global 2026 this year. And I believe when you walk away from this session, you will feel confident and equipped for building your own security program. So let's go back to our original question. What if information security is a martial art? If you really think about it, blue team it's on the defensive side of security, and red team is on the offensive side of security. And Sun Tzu, an ancient Chinese military master, used to say, 知己知彼，百战百胜, meaning knowing yourself and know your enemy. In 1,000 battle, you will know no peril. So how do we apply martial art to information security? I'd like to use a scenario of Alice and Bob, who both work for an airline company called XYZ. They both love martial arts and are now tasked to build a strong security program. And data is everywhere for their company. So they have the same goal of protecting the company data. But the thing is, they found lots of security tools out there. But why are they still dealing with multiple incidents, security incidents, frequently? And they found they don't even know if those security tools are being used. So they figure tools without integration create false confidence. So they got an idea of using the supreme martial art introduced by this martial art novel, Tianlong Babu, which is written by Jin Yong in 1960s. This is one of his renowned novel work. So Alice and Bob would like to use the supreme martial art, Six Paws Divine Swords, which is legendary energy technique using internal force to form invisible blades. But in order to do this technique, there's a foundational martial art called Wan-Yang finger, which is famous finger technique for healing and attack. So you see, Wan-Yang finger is using one finger to do the work. And you really need to know how to do one and then do the six. And when you got to the 6 fingers of techniques, you need to really get an internal force, which is another martial art called Bei Ming, divine power, which absorbs and transfers others' chi, internal force, to yourself. So you have the endless internal force to use the 6 paws divine swords. So now, probably enough for the martial art background. And Alice and Bob would like to use those divine swords for their security program to build it up. So we will dive in for each of them and we will explain some of the use cases. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's dive right in. So firstly, it's the Shaoshang sword, Shaoshang Jian, opening attacks, breaking through robust defenses, straightforward. And in cybersecurity, we also use robust and straightforward asset management. You can't protect what you don't know. You need to know what you're protecting, what's out there. So visibility is the foundation of governance. But how do we do that? Yup, there is a foundation that we need to build on first. Just like the Wan-Yang finger in martial art analogy, in this case, is asset clarity. We need to know what's out there and then be able to manage them. So asset management is actually one of the core components in the program. So on the left-hand corner, we list out the industry control framework like NIST 853, ISO 27001, 222, and CIS control version 8. They all have asset management part of their framework. But what are the core components of asset management? It would be asset inventory, data classification, identity mapping, and cloud visibility. And how do we implement it? We can use CMDB, discovery agents, system data flow diagrams that will tell us how data flows in and out between the systems. An automated asset discovery tool, data labeling, or DSPM, the data security posture management tool, will be able to see what data is out there and where are they located. So here is an example of Alice and Bob. The airline usually have the web server that customer will purchase the airfare ticket on their website, and the database behind it. And of course, Alice and Bob will have the laptop with them. So these are the asset name of each, and we identify if they are external facing or internal facing. And also we identify how many accounts are there. Are they regular account or admin privilege account? We're moving on to the next sword, the Shaoyang sword, Shangyang sword, Shangyang Jian. Ingenious, difficult to fathom, unpredictable angles, and deceptive trajectories. With all unknown threats out there and zero vulnerabilities that doesn't really have the patch yet, we really want to use the risk management to manage the risk for the business. From technical issues to business impact. What does that really mean to business if a service is down? Or firewall rules is not setting up correctly? Not all threats deserve equal effort. Risk is actually a decision tool, not a fear amplifier to get us worried or overwhelmed. So how do we implement it? So this is also a core component in the security program. We can see all of the control list this component in their framework again. What are the core components of risk management? It would be risk register, laying out likelihood and impact, and the risk responses that being applied so that the risk can be reduced from inherent risk to residual risk. And how do we implement? We can use asset risk tagging and BIA, business impact assessment scoring, to categorize those assets, to rank them down. What assets are critical? What assets are not so critical? And we can then use a qualitative or quantitative assessment to assess the risk. Those approaches are good and for sure useful. But if you really want to get down to the numbers calculation, the FAIR risk framework, FAIR, that is something, the tool you want to look into. And a quick example for Alice and Bob again, they have the asset inventory set up already as here. They just add the rank and the RTO for it. They just rank the asset. So like web server in this case will be ranked high because their RTO, they only allow up to 6 hours downtime, whereas database can be up to 12 hours. And the laptops is ranked low because that allow more downtime. So the next we are looking at the third sword, 中冲 sword, 中冲剑, engaging multiple opponents simultaneously, sustained energy projection, powerful momentum. In cybersecurity, we also engage multiple assets by scanning their vulnerabilities and managing them. The people will think scanning is the security, but actually it's not. Scanning, it's easily implemented, right? It's for sure useful because it scans the data in your environment and it scans all the vulnerabilities that they have in your environment. But prioritization is hard, and how to management is hard. But luckily, linking vulnerability score with asset criticality will help. And again, this is the core component of security program. And what are the core components? CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System, that gives the scores to each vulnerability. But does that mean that's the real business risk for us? Probably not, because those vulnerabilities out there probably not applicable to us because we don't have that system associated to that vulnerability. So exposure context matters. And if vulnerability is applicable to us, and how we patch them in a timely manner. How do we implement this? Of course, the scanning tool that we can have that in place. And how do we patch? And even patch effectively. We can automate the patch. We would like to minimize false positives, which sometimes it needs the investigation if that is not so straightforward. And again, linking vulnerabilities to the assets will help us to triage the vulnerabilities in the proper manner. And a quick example is here. Threat modeling or tabletop exercise. It can be the paper-based even. But we can also use the scanning scope, the scanning tool, and we can set up the scope. It could be internal-facing devices, external-facing devices, internal scan, external scan, and what are the frequencies of the scan. It can be monthly, daily, or even annually against different types of devices, including servers, databases, or laptops, etc. So with only one vulnerability management control, it's not enough. We need more controls for sure. So the fourth sword, Wan-Ju sword, victory through stagnant simplicity, invaluable in defensive situations. So in cybersecurity, we would want to use a simple and systematic approach to defend ourselves by selecting proper controls. The policies are for sure good, but they're also for sure not enough, right? Policies are usually administrative control, but they are not technically will protect the data from going out or unauthorized access coming into the system, right? And with all those controls we select, we want to have the periodic review, the continuous assurance, making sure that is still applied to us and effective. And on the left corner, if you have a sharp eye, you probably notice that CIS control version 8 is not listed out here. But it doesn't mean that selecting control is not important or less important than the others. It just means that because CIS control itself is already limited list, that's already help us to finalize the list for the essential controls that we should implement. So that's why it's already considered the selecting the great control. So what are the core components of selecting the controls? We need to consider the regulatory environment or the standards in the environment, in the countries that we are at, in the industry we are in. Like Taiwan, we have PDPA, Personal Data Protection Act, CDMA, CSMA, Cybersecurity Management Act. In EU, they have GDPR. The US healthcare has the HIPAA, right? And what's the framework that we can use to build up the control set? And we need to identify the ownership in the organization so that we can ensure those controls are implemented correctly. And we are also need to tailor those control description, because they are definitely not one size for all companies, right? Some of the controls might fit larger company, whereas small companies might not be able to do it or not applicable to them. So how do we implement it? We would want to use control mapping or crosswalk to really look into those framework or the laws or standards that applying to us. And what are the differences? Maybe they are talking about the same thing, but what we can do, can we do them all? So know your environment externally and internally and externally is important. So the quick example outlined here, they are already, security professional have already done the work for us. The 少中剑, light agility and swift speed, unique single point focus, hitting vital points. In cybersecurity world, we often have logs swiftly forwarded to a single centralized point to enable us to do the full continuous monitoring. We need to know and be notified when controls fail. Controls are only useful if they work. A control is real only when it is testable. And a SIEM is actually the tool that can be the eyes of continuous monitoring. What do I mean by that? This diagram illustrates the SIEM in the middle is a central point that collects all the logs, the syslogs, and the data from different sources. It could be antivirus software, it could be email gateway, network devices, firewall, IDS, servers, and even endpoints that allow the security practitioners, that you and me, to further investigate the and what are the core components of it? Yeah, we just talked about the SIEM system that give us visibility that we can validate control effectiveness. But sometimes the data is probably not available in SIEM. Maybe that is not so technical, so it doesn't have the log to be forwarded. So we don't have it. So we still need to collect the data from the stakeholders. And how do we do that? It's by firstly prioritizing the logs and what are the logs that needs to be ingested, and then set up the rules that for SIEM to aggregate and come up with the alerts that we want to be notified. And of course, build up the partnership with the stakeholder, with the leadership, the different departments, so we have the good relationship with them, and then also collect something that we need. Example for this, if we want to be notified of privilege escalation event, we will want to ingest the logs, Windows security logs, if the environment is Windows. If that's Linux, it would be a Linux logs, right? Auth log, authentication log from Linux. And in SIEM or the other tool, we'll have the correlation rules and detection rules set up by looking at the event ID 4672, a special privilege granted by logon, and followed by 4624, the successful logon, to be able to have that risk, the alert triggered if something happened. And we're able to investigate who, where, which privileges were granted. And for those control testing or the continuous monitoring that we are doing, is the goal is to reduce the risk. Lastly, the 少则剑, 少则 sword, left little finger creating a symmetric tactic, unique transformation and adaptation. With all those changes happen internally or externally, we need to be adaptive or getting the feedback from stakeholder, from a leadership, and even for outside advisory. The security is a living loop. It doesn't really have the start date or the end date. Maybe some task within the program, but overall, it's a continuous process. Getting feedback is the path to resilience, and resilience is the topic of this year's CyberSec conference. We want to getting mature, and getting maturity requires reflection. And what are the core components here? We could host a feedback meeting, we generate monitoring reports, we can schedule management review. And we want to really think kind of reversely to like, what could we do better? What could we have done? And what can we do better to adjust? If something happened, what can we learn from it? And what kind of reports that can be shown to management or shown to the security practitioner so we can better monitor the status or even be triggered by the alerts? What about the risk heat map provided to the stakeholders or the leadership? And here is a quick example followed by the example that we use in continuous monitoring SWORD. If the incident really happened after privilege escalation attack, maybe we think we need the SIEM in our environment, and that's redesigning controls. Maybe we need the multi-factor authentication policy enabled for privileged accounts. Maybe update the logout attempts from 10 to 5. And those sorts what we just talked about, it can really stand alone on itself when applying the PDCA model that's shown on the screen here, which is introduced by ISO 9001 and 27001. 6 pause defined sorts: asset management, risk management, vulnerability management, control design and selection, continuous monitoring, and feedback. But those can be the components for robust security program. But it won't be sustainable until the last piece that we talk about. Just like the Beiming divine power in the martial art world, the internal force for cybersecurity is the government engine, the governance and executive support. Without governance, security decays. Governance is the drivers of sustainability. Without the proper governance support or executive support, which is basically top-down approach, in my view, the bottom-up approach won't even work. Imagine the people from the bottom, they want to present the management review to the top, and they don't have the governance support. That review meeting probably won't be happening. And there would be no budget alignment for the security effort, and no continuous funding for them if they want to purchase a tool like SIEM or vulnerability management. And then lastly, the talent investment. And I would want to really call out to managers or leadership, please invest your people. And they definitely need to learn and grow from it, and they will need your support. As we wrap up, I would like to use this pyramid to illustrate how each piece is related to each other. This all robust security program cannot be sustainable by the internal force that will keep the robust security program going. The car needs the fuel and the gas so that the wheel can continue to go on the road, to keep it going, to keep it raised in the racetrack. So each piece or each sword, if they keep running and running and running, and eventually it back to the asset still, where the important asset, the data, is located. And the data is the goal. The security is complicated, not because of technology, but it's fragmentation which needs integration. So now Alice and Bob successfully built their robust security program. Yay! And they have the comment like this: like Kung Fu, true security mastery is not about having more tools, but sustaining aligned internal power. This session has been useful for you, and I'm sure that you will be able to apply the knowledge right away. Keep sharpening your sword in cybersecurity. Thank you for having me. Have a great day.